Recorded. I'd like to introduce our speaker, Religion and the Founding Fathers, presented by our own Mike Landrum.
To begin with a few words from Francis Bacon, a famous English philosopher and one of the leading lights of the Age of Enlightenment. We're going to be talking about enlightenment today and the construction of the Constitution. Francis Bacon wrote, "There is no comparison between that which is lost by not succeeding and that which is lost by not trying." The 4th of July, as every American can tell you, is celebrated as the date of the publication of the Declaration of Independence by the Second Continental Congress, meeting in 1776 in Philadelphia. That Congress, 56 delegates from the 13 colonies, met to decide what action they would take in response to a British law that had been passed known as the Stamp Act. The war had already begun as the Declaration was read out to the American people, and the battles at Lexington and Concord, Fort Ticonderoga, and Bunker Hill all occurred in the spring of 1775. The concluding battle came at Yorktown, Virginia, with the surrender of the British in 1781. At that point, all the fighting stopped, but the Redcoats remained in America while a treaty was hammered out in Europe. That took almost 2 full years. And finally, on September 3rd, 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed and the United States of America became a finished fact at last. But they were still governed by the inadequate Articles of Confederation and that same inept Continental Congress, which had such trouble paying the soldiers of the Revolutionary War. Finally, on May 13th, 1787, 12 full years after Paul Revere's historic ride through the peaceful New England countryside, George Washington arrived in Philadelphia again to meet once more with Ben Franklin and to start making plans to create a constitution. The Constitutional Convention took place from May 14th to September 17th, 1787, approximately 100 days of work. The point of the event was to decide how America was going to be governed. All right, it's not so emotional as all that. Although the convention had been officially called to revise the existing Articles of Confederation, many delegates had much bigger plans. The Virginia delegation arrived with their own state constitution as a suggested starting point. Men like James Madison and Alexander Hamilton wanted to create a new government rather than fix the old existing one. The delegates elected George Washington to preside. Congress had called delegates from the 13 states to meet again in Independence Hall for that purpose, the same place they had written the Declaration. 70 delegates had been selected, but only 55 were able to show up. There had been 56 delegates at the creation and signing of the Declaration. Only 6 men were present for both meetings, including Franklin and Washington. It was a period known as the Age of Enlightenment. It was also a time of scientific revolution, and the work of English philosophers Isaac Newton, Francis Bacon, Thomas Hobbes, and John Locke, known as the father of liberalism. And liberalism in those days meant liberty. Come to think of it, it still means liberty, doesn't it? Their religion was deism. And as modern Unitarians, we can recognize that many of their beliefs became close to our own. Deism is a philosophical belief in human reason as a reliable means of solving social and political problems. Deists argued that human experience and rationality, rather than religious dogma and mystery, determine the validity of human beliefs. Deists believe in a supreme being who created the universe to operate solely by natural laws. And after the creation, that being is absent from the world. Many of the founding fathers, Washington, Jefferson, Franklin, Madison, and Monroe, were practicing deists. Washington attended Anglican services at Trinity Church on Broadway in Lower Manhattan, but he declined to take the wine and wafer of communion. Jefferson created and published his own edit of the Bible, cutting the miracles from the New Testament, and that included there was no resurrection of Christ. He focused on the words that Jesus spoke. In his widely read The Age of Reason, Thomas Paine, the principal American exponent of deism, called Christianity a fable. During the Age of Enlightenment, the concept of natural laws was used to challenge the divine right of kings and became an alternative justification for the establishment of a social contract, positive law, and government, and thus legal rights in the form of classical republicanism. They did not want to support the idea of the divinity of kings, so that there was no connection between. That's why they were very careful to exclude religion from the Constitution. Locke wrote that men had inalienable rights, life, liberty, and property. Thomas Jefferson simply substituted the pursuit of happiness in the place of property in the Declaration. The founders took the idea of democracy from the ancient Greeks and republicanism from the Romans. The word republic derives from the Latin noun phrase res publica, public thing. Republicanism is the idea in which elected leaders represent the interests of the people. As the Republican thinker and second president of the United States, John Adams, stated in his introduction to his famous Defense of the Constitution, the science of politics is the science of social happiness, and a republic is the form of government arrived at when the science of politics is appropriately applied to the creation of a rationally designed government. The first 2 months of the convention saw a fierce debate over the 15 points of the Virginia Plan, which had been proposed by Madison as an upgrade to the Articles of Confederation. Yet the Committee of the Whole couldn't agree on anything. So on July 24th, the Committee of Detail was enacted to handle the drafting process. Now, this Committee of Detail was 5 members headed by John Rutledge. They nicknamed him Dictator John, and he was in charge of drafting the Constitution. The other members of his committee included men named Edmund Randolph, Oliver Ellsworth, James Wilson, and Nathaniel Gorham. Other than Gorham, the committee members had all been respected lawyers and would go on to become leading figures in the new government. Randolph would become the first Attorney General, while Rutledge, Ellsworth, and Wilson would become Supreme Court justices. The United States Constitution was drafted by the Committee of Detail, who used bits and pieces from the original Virginia plan, decisions of the Constitutional Convention, the group of people meeting there on modifications to that plan, along with other resources, including the Articles of Confederation. And they produced their first full draft. From August 6th to September 10th, the report of the Committee of Detail was discussed section by section and clause by clause. Once this phase of the convention had ended on September 10th, a committee of style was appointed to polish up the document. And these men were William Samuel Johnson, who headed up the committee. Other notable figures were Alexander Hamilton, Gouverneur Morris, James Madison, and Rufus King. Gouverneur Morris, the delegate from Pennsylvania with a first name that was hard to forget, is credited with writing the preamble. The preamble went, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America." The Constitution is certainly the most influential legal document in existence. Since its creation over 200 years ago, more than 100 countries around the world have used it as a model for their own. And it's a living document. It's one of the world's oldest surviving constitutions. And while the Supreme Court continually interprets the U.S. Constitution in order to reflect a rapidly changing world, its basic tenets have remained virtually unchanged since its inception, and unchallenged as well. People quarrel over its interpretation, but never do they question its underlying principles. The United States Constitution was adopted on September 17th, 1787, with 39 signatures before being distributed to the states for ratification. Didn't take very long, actually, from the setup of style to the ratification. We were a country in no time at all, 13 states voting. I'll leave with one last quote from Francis Bacon. "If we do not maintain justice, justice will not maintain us." Thank you. The floor is open for discussion, I suppose.
Thank you, Mike. We can stop recording and we'll begin discussion.